there's obviously a lot that's uncertain about where we're headed, right? But one thing that I will bet on with James's money, since I don't have any, is I absolutely think there's no question in my mind that people that it appears that we're entering a new phase of like relaxation on certain topics and being able to speak freely, like trans issues and a whole host of other things that were verboten before. I think that's going to change. I I think the people who now feel confident that they have seized the reins on culture, so like the edgy, like hip, young right wing conservative movement, I think they're going to not be able to stop themselves from becoming what they hate, because this is what always happens. And we will see very quickly, within maybe a couple of years, how these people they will be so drunk on the sense of power and also on the sense of grievance. A lot of them are way too young to remember the 90s, and they identify the left with being repressive and anti-free speech, and they're going to embody very quickly what I've come to discover, which is that nobody is comfortable with speech they don't like. And if they can control it, they will. So we're going to move from the woke era into like a brief honeymoon with, oh, we can speak, and then all of a sudden it'll shift, and we'll have a whole bunch of new terms for what we can and can't say. I mean, look, I've always said this: try burning a flag anywhere in the USA and then talk to me about whether you have free speech or not.
So let's tease this out a bit. Well, man, I could go any number of ways here. So, but I'll start by playing a bit of devil's advocate. Are you presupposing that essentially the quote unquote new regime, the Trump 2.0 re-election, and the MAGA land that sort of has swept into consciousness across America, John Jones doing the Trump dance after retaining his title, and players doing that, and the quivering in their boots of MSNBC and company and journalists across the world,
and people we know,
and such. Yeah, true. And many others. Are you presupposing that this is a transformational moment, that this is sort of something that will last more than a 4-year term?
It certainly feels that way. It's early to say, but it does feel like the dam has broken. It feels like there's a sense of empowerment to just drop the muzzle. And people are so fed up. I am so fed up, and I'm not even anything close to a Trumper or MAGA or any. I'm not. I don't even identify as right wing or conservative. The sense that we have been slowly, like slow dripped into complying with saying things that are patently fucking insane. I think it's like a spell has been broken. So whatever, it just so happens that Trump is a personality type who breaks things, and who's crude, and who just shoots from the hip and says whatever. I separate what's happening culturally from what he is politically, even though they're obviously connected, right? It just so happens he's the fucking car with a bomb strapped to it that just was sent into the lobby of a building in neutral gear, and right. I don't think people are going to want to give this up again, not so soon, not after 12 years of of having, our jaws wired shut. Does that answer
But
your question?
Sabby, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's an obvious flaw in your logic there.
Mm-hmm.
He was president for 4 of those 12 years.
Right. The culture is in a different spot. So time has moved since then, obviously, and the people who were screaming at us that this was the worst thing in the world, this is the worst thing in the world, their foothold in the culture has been drastically diminished. They've been undressed, right? We know pretty much just about everybody in my social circle is still singing that same tune. These people who felt quote unquote grief after the election, which I think is ridiculous, but I mean that's what they feel. Um, uh, there's still tons of people that I'm surrounded by, and certainly in my field, who music journalism, who are still on that, but I think the culture has moved off of it. The broadcast platforms that were hammering us every day during Trump's president first term, they've just lost their credit, like everything. They've lost their market share, everything, their audience. So the people who were quiet, the silent majority, I guess, who were grumbling through the first Trump presidency, you can fucking taste it in the air, like something has broken, like this is a regime change culturally.
Okay, so that all right, so those two tides, right? So there's the political tide
Mm-hmm.
and there is the cultural tide. So what you could argue that the political tide somewhat, I think that I agree with you that there are differences clearly. The Tulsi Gabbard of it all, the Robert Kennedy of it all.
My
You
boy Jay
have this
Bhattacharya of it
Jay
all.
Bhattacharya of it all. You have this sort of a much bigger tent. At least it appears, um, on the political side, but at the same time, it is the same guy and his crew that's coming back. So, I mean, is just from you hit on Bhattacharya. Is the difference COVID?
That's a good question. I think there's a few different things. It's hard for me to get that high of a bird's eye view. It just feels like the paradigm we're already in a new paradigm. Although I think it will be slower in the institutions that are still beholden
Yes.
to the old way of thinking, right? So I think, but I think those institutions and increasingly the people on the ground who still subscribe to that view are going to sense in no uncertain terms that they are now in the minority. And once they get over the 5 stages of grief and the denial that they're not in charge of culture anymore, I think so many of those people are just going to go along to get along, which is what so many of them were doing to begin with. Right. And so they will then turn into the kind of quiet, grumbly, like we'll keep this on the down low that, we're all about. I saw a couple people at a show the night before Thanksgiving wearing masks. Show, and not to stereotype, but they were like the stereotype. They weren't blue haired, but they would have been called that, by somebody stereotyping them. Right. They're in a room full of people. Two people had masks in a room full of people. I think that's a really fitting analogy for where those people are going to be, culturally, socially, even. They're going to just be on an island. You remember how you and I talked about this? I don't know if you said this. I don't know if you said this on a live stream, how you went to a bar. This might have been 2021, 2022, and you said you could feel like you were in church or something like that. Like you could feel the pressure, the division in terms of what you were sort of allowed to say and think.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, yeah, man, it feels that way too. I think that's changed.